Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We're breaking down UFC 323. It's going down in Las Vegas. It's the last pay-per-view of the year, and it's Merab Dvalishvili against Petr Yan, the rematch. They're going to do it again. Hopefully, both guys are healthy this time. No excuses. Let's find out who's the better man, and leave no doubt. And I think it should be an awesome fight card. We got two great title fights up top. And we got two great hosts for the show today. My brother Wiz, MMA, back in the building. How are you, my man?
First up, a little cheers.
I got the ginger ale because we got the early bus tomorrow, but you know what I'm saying?
I got me a little Stone IPA. I'm not going to lie. It's been a long week at work, and I'm just excited to finally break down some fights with my brother Liam. Thank you all for showing up. As always, it seems like these Friday streams, we have a little bit more of a turnout. So let's keep this going. And my guys, this is, I always say, like with these big pay-per-view cards, that is the best card that we've had in a while. I'd say this is probably second best card of the year. So really excited for this one. And my brother Aaron, man, maybe one day, maybe never, actually.
But for now, we'll get it cracking, my man. We'll get it cracking for the people that are fighting that fatigue. I appreciate everybody rocking with us on the late night, guys. It's wrestling season. It's busy times over here, but we still got to come to you guys with the breakdowns. We still got to find a way to try and get some angles on these fights. So with that being said, guys, let's do it with the first fight of the night. We got the first weight miss of the night, right? Hate to start off like that, but that's the way it's got to be, right? Myron Santos comes in here, and if you remember, Wiz, I think he did his last fight up at 155 against Sadiq Yusuf, another guy who's kind of moonlighted between 145, 155 pounds in the UFC. So Myron Santos, maybe got a little too comfortable, maybe eating a little bit too much acai, and brother comes in a little bit overweight for this fight, right? 147.5. Muhammad Hillman Naimov on the other side, a physical guy in his own right, 5-1 in the UFC. You got 3-0 for Myron Santos, the winner of the Ultimate Fighter. So really, one of these guys is going to be taking a step up in competition after this. I would say the guy who's got a little bit more long-term upside, a little bit more of that prospect status is Myron Santos. You look, he's got more professional experience here, despite being the younger athlete, right? He's 25 years of age, 31 for Naimov. And we can give a little bit of context to that Naimov 5-1 record, right? Eric Silva, basically takes 4 steps backwards, puts his toes in the cage, and the fight is over shortly thereafter. It's like just a freak incident. Then you look at, the fight with Nathaniel Wood. I bet on Muhammad Naimov there, plus 2XX. I was happy to take that number in the location, given the context, everything like this. But again, looking back, he fouled him several times. He cheated in that fight. He was nearly finished in the third round against Nathaniel Wood. So obviously, Muhammad Naimov has some skills. He's a strong guy, physical guy, can wrestle. But I do think that, when he can't get that wrestling game going and he's got to rely on the striking on the feet, he's really relying on his power. I do think he's a guy that can slow down over time. I think we saw Felipe Lima, basically just put the pace on him, right? Just work this guy until he had no will left to compete. And he was out positioned, out thought in that fight. And, I do think that, Myron Santos, he puts heavy hands on guys. He can land big shots. He's a clever guy, but we've also seen him hit and hurt. I thought the Francis Marshall fight, was one where it could have went either way, right? It certainly could have been a loss on his column. It could have been, one of those fights where, some of the flaws in his game, some of the greenness gets exposed. But again, he's kind of had those experiences. He had those experiences regionally as well. And, if he can get disciplined with the weight and everything else, I do think this could be, a kind of, coming out party for somebody like Myron Santos. He already won the show. He did it in emphatic fashion with a massive knockout against Can Offley. And Can Offley finally broke through, got in the win column, right? So, we've seen some of those performances age okay. And for Muhammad Naimov, I think he's still looking for that signature win, a really good, clean performance, go out there. And, if he can go out there and beat Myron Santos after he misses weight, I think it'd certainly be a feather in his cap. So for me, the ways I would look at this fight potentially would be looking at Santos late, maybe getting a little bit contrarian, in looking at some of those finish markets. I'll let you guys be clever and read between the lines there a little bit. But I think that Overall, I look at this fight as if Naimov's going to get this fight done, I think he's probably going to push the wrestling, mix it up and earn a gutsy decision. But, that's kind of just the way I see him getting it done. I think Myron Santos, pretty tough kid, pretty resilient, pretty good chin overall. Even though he did get cracked by Francis Marshall, I think that was a little bit of an outlier. So I think it should be a good scrap while they're both fresh. But I just think Myron Santos is probably going to be the fresher guy late. And I think ultimately that's the difference maker for me. What about you, Wiz?
Great breakdown, Liam. When it comes to this fight, there's a couple of different things that you have to take a look at. Obviously, Myron Santos, he missed weight by 1.5 pounds. His last fight was at 155, so maybe just facing a little bit of the effects of that. When you move up just randomly for one fight, it kind of has that negative effect on some fighters, especially the ones who have struggled to make weight in the past. We take a look at Myron Santos's career here in the UFC, and in his fight against Cannibal, we didn't really see too much. It was, Cannibal at the end of the day. More of a brick house guy that's going to push you against the cage, doesn't have, with all due respect, has some skills in mixed martial arts, but his skill set revolves around his physicality, and those guys don't tend to last too often in the sport. So it's going to be a little bit easier to shine, and especially in the striking style of Myron Santos in those kind of fights. And then you go up and you watch the Francis Marshall fight. He lost that fight. Let's just be honest with ourselves there. I think Myron Santos lost that fight, and one thing we saw is that he can find himself stuck on his back for extended periods of time. Now, that, let's just call a spade, that was Francis Marshall, and Marshall has some good control. Naimov, when he gets his takedowns, we have rarely seen him control fights on the mat for extended periods of time, which is what gives me some pause. But also, I was not thoroughly impressed with Myron Santos's just ability to get up to his back to his feet. So I'm not quite sure if he pursues the takedowns here and he lands the takedowns, if he's able to control Myron on the floor. Now, in the striking realm, I think Myron's going to be able to hurt Naimov whenever he wants. Naimov has shown to have lackluster durability, and in this fight, I think Myron's going to be the much sharper striker, the faster striker, and I think Naimov, at some point in the second or third round, when he starts to slow down, I think Myron can take advantage and land some big strikes and potentially hurt Naimov. So I'm thinking this is going to be a KO 2-3 for Myron Santos. But am I at all excited by this minus 265 price tag? Hell no. I don't think Myron Santos has proven anything to us in the UFC just yet. So I'm giving a little bit of a pause on this guy.
Yeah, and especially, looking at this kind of fight, for me, I'd rather be involved in the prop side of the equation, than looking at a side in particular based on how they've priced the fight. With that being said, my man, we can move along to the next fight. And Wiz, I'll let you start us off here, my man. The biggest favorite on the fight card by a big margin, Mansur Abdul-Malik, been a little bit underwhelming. What do you think about this fight?
I'm just going to be very quick with this one. Antonio Tracoli, with all due respect, has not shown he's not the mixed martial arts fighter that we thought he was. I've heard reports of him not training. I've heard reports that he hasn't trained in any of his UFC fights, just, showing up randomly to the gym, dropping in.
We call that the John Volante around here.
Yeah, he's more invested in his poker career. Looking for the next buy-in maybe for this one. If Mansour Abdul-Malik didn't bet on the over 1.5, just joke. I think there's a real possibility that Antonio Tracoli gets knocked out in the first 3 punches if it's a combination by Mansour Abdul-Malik. And I don't say that jokingly. I think that's a serious truth. If Mansour Abdul-Malik lands a clean right overhand, he likely knocks Tracoli out. But yeah, it's not a surprise. Minus 1,300 favorite, the more athletic guy, and Mansour, the guy that can land takedowns, he can win in the striking. He can get it done whatever way he wants to. So give me Mansour. We have not seen any tape from Tracoli to say anything otherwise. So yeah, Mansour KO1.
Yeah, I'll just say the way I would look is round 1, round 2. Like those individual plays, I'd keep it as simple as that for me. In terms of if you want to, that's the way to do it. If you don't want to, that makes sense too. I wouldn't get involved with a minus 1,300 on almost anybody, but I do think that Tracoli is a role player. Shout out to Martian MMA. If anybody remembers, he used to do a podcast in this space. I think he has since stopped doing that, but Martian and Ozzy back in the day, those that remember OGs. And, he used to say some guys are fighters and some guys are role players. That, like, they're not really here to be MMA fighters. They're kind of just doing the thing. And I feel like Tracoli is in that spot. No disrespect to the guy, but he's won one MMA fight, I think, in the last like 5 or 6 years. So the guy's just really not, been serious about his MMA career. And when that's the case, you just can't really support somebody like that. So again, if you want to say, hey, plus 750, hold your nose, like you're a better man than I, but I just don't see this one being a good dog shot. I feel like Tracoli's here to get a paycheck, unfortunately. All right. And with that being said, we can move on to the next fight where Ibo Aslan is taking on Iwo Baraniewski. And, you see Baraniewski go from being an underdog on the Contender Series against Muhammad Ali. Basically people were thinking, man, this guy's going to get his jiu-jitsu going. And, the fight was over on the feet before it ever got started on the ground, right? He kind of just smoked him. And Ali, kind of just got caught cold and also just, looked out of position, looked a little bit, slow in the moment, right? Like he just was not prepared for the speed at which that fight took place. And I feel like, Iwo, in my opinion, his upside in this fight is coming out in grappling. Aslan has been working on his wrestling. Theoretically, that could be a way he keeps it on the feet, right? Anti-wrestling, like just try and keep it upright. But time on the mat is hard to just like make up for quickly, right? It normally takes some time. We'll talk about that in other matchups on the card and things like that. But when you just look at a fight like this, Ibo Aslan, for me, his wrestling, his grappling is not very good, right? Iwan Kutalaba, I believe, is 3-4 career to the submission, right? He's not Johnny Jiu-Jitsu, but he was able to take this guy down. And when he got it on the ground, he was able to just kind of cut through him like butter. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. And you look at Iwo Baraniewski, he got his brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu earlier this year. He's a black belt, I believe, in Judo as well. So the guy just has a much deeper pedigree on the ground. And when you look at his 6-0 professional record and the fact he's only gone, in first rounds, that is a little bit concerning. But then you do look back and he had an extensive amateur career as well. So the guy's been super active, right? He's had like 26 fights, I think, since 2020. Like the guy's just been getting after it, trying to get as many fights as he can. So certainly, again, this is another fight where I just look at the money line and I'm like, if you didn't have Iwo last time at plus 2XX, do you really want to chase him in a UFC debut where we know even great fighters can get jitters, even great fighters can kind of go out there and underperform, feel like the lights are too bright? It's not, Johnny at the Apex either. It's a big pay-per-view show. You might feel those flutters, right? You might see some celebrities in the crowd in these things. But for me, I'm just looking at how do I see this going? If Iwo's got a good game plan, if he shows up with the right intelligent approach, he's going to go out there and not exchange with this guy. He's going to try and take him down from the opening bell until he gets the finish. And for me, that's the way I would look at the Iwo side, is looking at him getting this fight to the ground. Shout out to my guy Moise in the chat, always very sharp with the European grappling reads. And he's talking about Iwo deadlifting at a crazy rate and also having nasty leg trip. Yeah, I just think, he's got way better skills on the mat and in the, clinch transitions, right? That being said, the way he loses his fight, in my opinion, is just getting smoked on the feet, right? Like Ibo Aslan kind of throws just like, and in the Billy Elikana fight, he did nothing. So what do you expect from him in this fight? I mean, like, I don't know. Flip a coin, right? Is he going to come out aggro? Is he going to go try and, reserve himself and, sprawl and brawl and try and win by one punch? I honestly don't know what approach he'll bring to this fight. And so for that reason, again, like he's just not a guy I feel inspired to bet. Like I never really rated his skill set very high. I thought that, his aggro punching and the fact that he was winning some fights would get the UFC to maybe matchmake him softly, because he had a decent following on socials and these kind of things. But then he kind of got found out. And like that Elikana fight is just the kind of thing that makes the UFC like, what are we paying you for? Like, Are you going to go out there and fight? Like, make something happen, good or bad. Like, just get in a fight of some kind. It was just a really disappointing performance from both guys. Didn't make you want to watch the next fight from either guy. So I feel like for me, Iwo made me want to watch his next fight in his last fight with Ali. And I also have just seen pretty solid pedigree overall, well-rounded skill set. Seems like he's dangerous everywhere. So for me, Iwo's the pick. But it's a light heavyweight fight on the prelims for a reason. Pretty high volatility baked in, but I just think if he takes it to the ground, it's going to be step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. What do you think?
Yeah, first and foremost, shout out my guy, No Process. Best comment we've ever received, gotta say. Going back to this fight, we got Ibo versus Iwo. Depending on which region you're in, you might confuse the two guys. I really did not want to tape this fight because I knew at the end of taping this fight, I really wouldn't be passionate about either side because at the end of the day, both these guys are so green, so low level. Even though Ibo has multiple fights in the UFC, has not really shown improvements. In his last fight in the camp, he went to Dagestan to quote unquote improve wrestling and prepare wrestling. Didn't show a lick of it. Ibo at the end of the day is a fighter that if you look at the tape and you run the tape, you will find that this guy tries to time a right hand, and that's all he has. The combinations, they are just fluff. They don't actually have any, meaning to them. It's just the right hand that's really hurting guys. The other stuff is just to set it up. And Iwo, on the other hand, is, also another overhand into the clinch, into trips along the cage, which I do like his trips along the cage. If he finds success against the cage and he mixes in the trips and finds the takedowns, it's a world of trouble for Ibo. Even though Ibo did scramble well against the Pleasure Man, I don't think it'll be easy for Iwo to get the sub immediately. But this guy, Ibo, I don't think that he's preparing for a grapple-heavy game plan. I think that's where his demise would be in this fight. It seems to me like he's content with just keeping fights upright for as long as possible, and then if it hits the mat, he'll just scramble until he's gassed out. All this to say that I'm not passionate on either side. I think Iwo wins because he has more ways to win. He can take this fight to the ground. He can knock out Ibo. He can hurt him on the feet. Ibo, at the end of the day, is low volume with his approach in the striking, and you just can't trust that. Even though he's the much more experienced fighter at this level, and I just can't. For me, this is not even a dogger pass, not even a favorite pass. It's a pass. And I am very happy to go to the liquor store and get some snacks.
Fair play, my man. Fair play.
Yeah, he might be like Evan said in the chat, he might be the only fighter that needs to get sent to Dagestan for 3 years and forget.
Maybe 5, huh? After that last stint didn't really seem to take. So let's see if a longer trip does the trick. My man, we got next up.
Forget. No timeline.
We've got a guy from your neck of the woods. I'm not sure if you have anything that you're willing to say on this fight, my man, but whatever you'd like to say on this fight, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll give very high-level notes on this one because I wasn't involved in the Jalen Turner camp. I sparred with him, I want to say it was like 4 times this camp over the past 3.5-ish weeks. And, I mean, he probably won't even remember my face. I was wearing face shield and everything. Very humble guy. It's the first time I've ever really met Jalen in person. Down to earth, seems very different than what he was initially. During his run, found God. That's his purpose now in fighting. So good on him, just finding the motivation. And the guy is still young. He can make a run and has all the skills. I think in this fight, it's just you see Edson Barboza. He already announced this is his retirement fight. He will not be looking to fight again. He's 39 years old. He's taken a lot of damage. Last fight at 155, it was his first fight in the weight class. Looked terrible, slow, was getting hurt quite a bit. Just managed to survive really on autopilot there. And, I just don't see this going any other way except for Jalen Turner finishing the fight. Regardless of how Turner looks, I think just the speed on its own is going to compromise Barboza, and the straight shots are really what hurt you the most. And I think Barboza is going to be at such a height disadvantage here, that the reach, as I always mention and explain on the show, when you have the height advantage, it takes that much more to reach up at their face. It's just you're magnifying the distance between you and the other fighter. So it's just a lot tougher to reach them, and it exposes your chin up because you're finding yourself, trying to get into their pocket. Unless Barboza is aiming for the body and staying long with his kicks, that's probably his best way to win a point-based decision. But yeah, I will say this in the past, just based off tape, you look at what Jalen Turner has offered, and when things are going his way, he looks like he is the man. And when things are not going his way, he looks for a way out. I'm just going to call it how I see it. So he's a good hammer, bad nail. And if this fight extends for any reason, things might get hairy. But I really, truly think this is a very, very winnable fight for Jalen Turner.
Yeah, man. When Jalen Turner was first coming up through the UFC, I felt like I just knew the secret. I was like, this guy's the biggest lightweight on the roster. He's super dangerous. And he lost one fight to Vicente Luque where he was like a sacrificial lamb. And so people were ready to write him off. But I just felt like, there were some opportunities, right? Early on, I think it was the Riddell fight. I'm trying to think even what other fights. Maybe it was Uros Medic along the way, but the sub price used to be like plus 900 and all these huge numbers and things like this. And I look at a guy like Jalen Turner as, at his best, an extremely opportunistic finisher. A guy that can hit somebody very hard, knock them out, hurt them bad. Obviously the one thing about finding God that it could be dangerous for a fighter is that it takes away a little bit of that killer instinct. But I just feel like Jalen Turner could mercifully potentially submit a gentleman like Edson Barboza, who is a very good fighter, but, has been in some compromised positions on the mat. And, the one thing about getting hurt when you're a really experienced striker is you can kind of find a way to survive and move around and stay in the fight and try and just roll and, not get hit with anything too clean and back up and evade. But if somebody hurts you and then just grabs a hold of you and starts squeezing you and rolling you around, it's a lot harder to deal with that. And, I do think the intangible of this fight is, if Jalen Turner doesn't want to be in there, sometimes those feelings come out right before a competition, right? And you just don't want to be there. And, that's the scary thing, again, looking at these prices, price is everything in the game. And, I look at the big price and that's not enticing me, right? But just looking at how he wins, how he always wins, you just look at Jalen Turner, he's an open secret, right? Just go look at his record. It tells you a lot. The guy is extremely dangerous in the first 2 rounds. Extremely dangerous. Can hit you, can hurt you, can knock you out, can finish you, can submit you. But if the fight goes much longer than that, things can go sour, right? We've seen guys like Matt Frivola, granted it was a long time ago, but kind of rinse and repeat took him down, right? Those are the ways that people have gotten to Jalen. Take him down or put him in compromised positions on the mat or really make him tired. And Edson doesn't do any of those things. So it just seems to me like this is an absolute disaster for Edson. Does he have great spinning kicks and, some chopping low kicks and he can box a little bit? Yeah, in his prime, all those things are true. I just feel like when I'm rewatching the film on Edson, he looks like a guy who's had 30 some odd fights in the UFC. He looks like a guy who's a little bit past it. And by the way, guys, people were saying Edson was chinny when he was getting knocked out by Cowboy Cerrone fucking 10 years ago. Like, you just have to look back, and he's had a great career since. He's had a resurgence. He's done all these things. But another point is the weight fluctuations, the going up and down. I don't think that's great, right? I think Jalen Turner probably has a future at 170, and I feel like Edson Barboza, he probably went to 145 a little too late in his career. So you just look at some of these things, and Edson's first fight back at 155 against a Drakkar Klose who's had some medical problems, who's openly campaigned for fighting the worst guys in the division. And now he's fighting a Jalen Turner who, not long ago was a guy who was a surefire top 15 guy and a really scary guy. And he blew it against Moicano. No doubt about it, right? Like, you just got to call it the way it is. And in my article for that fight, I said, Jalen Turner round 1 or 2, or Moicano comes back like in round 2 and 3. And it's just like been the story of his career, right? I just don't really see Edson being that guy, to turn it around on him either, because he's kind of passed it himself. So let's see. Let's see, man. Edson's a legend of the octagon. So in a retirement fight, I hope that they give him a great send-off. I hope that everybody, shows him love. He deserves that. Been a absolute warrior, duck nobody, been a guy who's like really, really stayed after it his whole career, fought tough guy after tough guy. But you look right now, and timing's everything in mixed martial arts. And Jalen Turner, if he's motivated and wants to be there, he's 30 years of age, and that's still prime age for fighting. And Edson Barboza is 39 and has admitted that, guys, I'll just say before his last fight, I had information that, he was hurt going into that fight with Tracoli close. So I was, telling people, like, do not bet on Edson unless you're extremely confident that he can win with an injury. And I thought he looked like he was a little bit injured going into that fight. He's definitely had a lot of damage to his face and his eyes and everything else over the years. From these fights, a lot of damage adding up. So I don't think any of that's favorable. I lean towards violence overall in that fight, and I'll just leave it there. All right. Oh, man, something's got to give here, right? We got Bruno Ferreira, who always likes to get it done inside the distance, right? One way or the other, kill or be killed. And you've got Marvin Vettori, the Italian brick. We'll send it over to you first, brother Wiz. What do you think of this fight, my man? Going down the middleweight division, pick 'em price tag. Who do you got?
Let's address the obvious here. Ferreira missed weight. This dude's 5'10" at middleweight, dude. I don't have no words when he's already like someone that looks a little bit more pudgy at 185. But man, I really just don't know how. I just don't know how. Now, the funny stat here, let me just make sure I have my number right here on the finishes and for the Ferreira side. Yeah, Ferreira, just confirming, this dude has never been a decision, and Marvin Vettori has been to 16 decisions, 8-8. Something's got to give. And initially, when I was taping before the weigh-ins, I really liked the Ferreira side. I thought, Vettori at this point has taken a lot of damage, has, the wheels are starting to fall off. And Ferreira, although does not carry the cardio, he has one thing. He's tough. He'll walk forward. He's going to swing heavies at you for a round and a half. And if he lands one, he has a good chance of putting your lights out. And if not, severely compromising you to the point where he can land ground and pound to finish the fight, or at least win around 10-8 and then continue from there. But more often than not, he's finishing you. And I thought that was going to be the case because Marvin Vettori, if he has one thing, he has, he's tough, but his striking defense is awful. He gets landed on left, right, and center. And Ferreira, like I said, he needs to land one, and he'll severely compromise you if not finish you. Can Vettori finish Ferreira? Maybe in the later rounds. That's where I would give Vettori maybe a better live entry after a round to a round and a half when you start to see Ferreira gas out. Even taking a stab at Marvin 2-3, that was a hedge for me just in case things went south. Now, after he misses weight, I have not bet it, and I will not bet it. We'll likely just watch for entertainment. I do think that he still wins the fight. I think his power is just something that will translate, and Vettori's chin will finally get cracked. So give me Ferreira. Now, the interesting thing here is if Marvin Vettori is able to land takedowns successfully and zap Ferreira's cardio earlier, then sure. But I just don't think that Ferreira is that easy to take down in the early going. And if he's able to keep this fight standing for 5 minutes consistently, he's going to land something big. I can trust that.
Man, I look back at Bruno Ferreira, and I don't think the market knows how to price this guy. You look at the fact he is a big underdog against Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez in his debut, and beautiful knockout, right? A counterpunch knockout, kind of pulls Robo into it, moving his head out of the way, bing, bam, boom, and then counters him bad, smokes him in the pocket. So Bruno Ferreira has power. That was a great win. Then he goes to being a big favorite against Nursultan Ruziboev, and I bet Nursultan in that fight, right? Plus 190. Nursultan smokes him in the first round, right? Catches a kick, punches him in the head, knocks him out, right? Like really early in round one. And obviously Ruziboev's got some power, but still, like he's not doing that to everybody that he fights, right? So that was an impressive showing. And then you look at, okay, the Phil Hawes fight, uh, Phil Hawes is just like falling apart at the seams, right? And unfortunately, he was, brutally knocked out against the Russian character. What's his name? Ikram, right? He also got, basically his leg destroyed and then viciously knocked out by Roman Dolidze. Like everything kind of fell apart for Phil Hawes. No disrespect on his way out of the UFC. And then you look at, okay, Dustin Stoltzfus. That's an okay win, nothing crazy, but that's an okay win. That fight was madness, right? That fight was like back and forth and crazy, and then he just lands a crazy one and puts Stoltzfus away. Like, yeah, Ferreira is absolutely dangerous, but he's also really wild and reckless. Some of the things that he's doing, he's taking huge chances, and against Stoltzfus, who's maybe not that an athletic of a guy, he was able to get away with some of that stuff, but also he was fighting at a pace that, in my opinion, was not sustainable. Right? Like he was fighting like he was going out of business sale. It's like, I got 7 minutes to do this. And if not, I'm going to be in a really bad way. And then you look at the Abus Magomedov fight, and dude, Abus Magomedov, we just saw it again in his last fight. If you push that guy, he completely falls apart in his cardio. And he absolutely melted Bruno Ferreira and just used his big physicality, his leverage to get on top of him. And then Bruno goes from being the Hulk to just being Bruno. He's back to just being Bruno, dude. Like he's got 7.5 minutes of the Hulk, and then he's just back to being Bruno. And Bruno's just okay, man. And the thing about this fight is, I've always loved the expression "hungry dogs run fast." And you look at a guy like Marvin Vettori, 32 years of age. Like, he's got a lot of miles on him, right? He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's been in title fights. He's been at the top, but he's 32, and if he wants to keep making a living being a professional fighter, this is like a must-win type of fight for him. And Bruno's kind of been a 50-50 guy in the UFC. I thought against Jackson McVeigh, it was a very predictable fight. With all due respect to McVeigh, I called belly down armbar for Bruno Ferreira just because McVeigh wants to force the grappling, but he didn't really have the, skills, I thought, to do it to a guy like Bruno, because I was like, Bruno's just going to throw him over the top. He's really good at that. And then when he does that, he's going to get to his back take. He's going to get to his belly down armbar. Marvin Vettori has an excellent career record to the submission prop. He's been a guy that's trained on the ground for an extremely long time. So I don't think that, his jiu-jitsu is like some massive liability. He just went with Brendan Allen, who's an excellent submission player, one of the most proven middleweight submission grapplers in the division, and didn't get submitted there. So I feel like it's hard to imagine for me, Bruno submitting Marvin unless he hits another belly down armbar. And if he does, I mean, you just fucking take your hat off to the guy. But I think that's way easier said than done against Marvin, period. And then I look at Marvin as a guy that just is a 5-round fighter. Like he's fighting really elite guys in the division, top 5 and top 10 guys. And he's fighting them for, 25 minutes at a clip and not getting put away, getting hit with like Paulo Costa hit him with flush head kicks and didn't put him away. And so again, is it possible that the chin cracks at a certain point? Yeah. But it's like, is Bruno Ferreira a bigger hitter than Jerry Cannonier or Paulo Costa or any of these other guys that have literally kicked this guy flush in his head? And he, like, it's not even like a lot of times he gets hurt, dude. Half the time he literally no-sells it like he's just on a Sunday stroll. And so for me, like, I just feel like Vettori, he's kind of proven himself against an upper echelon level of guy. And even the fights without Asanya he had, he goes and wins a round. He gets a takedown here and there. He competes. The guy just has had these moments. And for me, Bruno Ferreira is still in the prove it stage of his career, at 33, right? Like, he's still kind of coming on in the UFC. So maybe he can put it all together. I've been higher on Bruno than a lot of people at times, but now it just feels like this might be a reality check for Bruno where, his wild style and his not having 15 consistent minutes could come back to bite him. And maybe he's sorted that out now that he has some more UFC experience. I do think he's got real judo skills and real ability, but I'm just not ready to sell all the Marvin stock yet. He's gone to really good gyms. He's always honed his craft against, really high level professionals. And he's just been a little bit unlucky. He hasn't had very favorable matchmaking, and he's lost a bunch of fights where he competed hard, but he just didn't have it against guys that were a little more athletic and a little bit more proven and a little bit more well-rounded. And I feel like in this fight, he's going to have the veteran experience on his side as opposed to giving that up against a lot of his recent opponents. And I feel like he can go out there and win this one. So I think it's going to be a scrap. I think he's going to have to earn it. I think he's probably going to take some damage in the first round of this fight. But I feel like Marvin Vettori, if there was ever a time to dig deep and get one, and also the thing is, Marvin hasn't finished a fight, I don't think, since 2021 or 2020 or something like that. But again, if there is ever a time to finish, Bruno is kill or be killed. He comes out and gives you everything. And if he doesn't have it, he's like, hey, it's not my night. You got me. It's like, that's kind of the way he goes. And I feel like he could go out there and do that against Marvin, run out of steam too early. And whether it's a TKO because of exhaustion or, finding that submission, I think a lot of people like that submission angle. Marvin, definitely more of a submission guy in the UFC. But he's knocked some guys down before. He's landed a handful of decent shots. I think it was Jack Hermanson that he knocked down back in the day. So before it was the hip new thing, right? So I think that, for me, the way that Marvin wins this is taking over with cardio and experience, and he does it in second and third round. So, to your point, maybe a live look, maybe, those later round props. But I wouldn't be too invested in Marvin either. Knowing what we know about Marvin, he's a guy that is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So he's going to have to get a workman-like performance going. All right. Next up, my man. This is one of the fights that's kind of flying under the radar this week. We got Ziam, the smile killer, taking on Nazim Sadykhov. And I'll start us off here, man. Nazim's a New York guy, so always rooting for our New York guys, wishing him the best. A guy who trains with Merab, a guy who trains with Aljamain, and a lot of top-level fighters. So, credit and respect where it's due. I think we've seen a lot of improvements from Nazim, especially from his regional career on up to the UFC. But he's also a guy that is not a consistent minute winner. He's not a guy that goes out there and dominates with his wrestling, for example, fight over fight. He's a guy that likes to mix it up on the feet, take big chances. He's a guy that's willing to lose an exchange but win a fight, push through adversity, deal with damage, go out there and find big shots on the feet. So he's a dangerous man. He's a guy that finds ways to win. He's a guy that's clearly a gamer, fights hard, not afraid to push forward. A lot of admirable traits. I also feel like on the back end, you got a guy in Ziam that is a really skilled fighter, a guy who's improving over time, a guy who's definitely shown massive improvements in the UFC. You think of the Terrence McKinney performance, kind of gets caught in some awkward early scrambles and gets his arm caught, gets submitted there. You think maybe this guy doesn't really have it. But now we've been seeing Ziam show a lot more ability in the wrestling and the grappling, show the ability to not only defend the takedowns, but reverse the takedowns, get his own takedowns going, work to his own positions. And you're also seeing that Ziam is a dangerous striker. I had seen pre-UFC, he had gotten a lot of finishes. He had been a guy who was finding those knockout shots, and it wasn't really materializing early in the UFC. That happens to some guys. They can't get those same knockout shots. They need to get their feet set. They need to find their way. And I feel like Ferreira is starting to just get comfortable. He's 28 years of age. He's a young guy. He's a big guy for this division, going to have a huge height and reach advantage in this fight. And I feel like he's just now getting to the peak of his performances. So for me, I'm going to respect Nazim enough to say it's going to be hard to put him away. It's going to be hard to get him out of there. He's such a tough guy. But I feel like Nazim is going to have to really find a big shot or, surprise him with an early takedown and try and catch him when they're both dry or something like that. Because I just feel like the longer this fight goes, the length, the minute winning, I think it's going to be Ziam getting off on his long, straight shots, using his footwork, his movement in the big cage. If Nazim gets over aggressive, maybe grabbing a hold of him in the clinch, mixing it up in there. I don't think he's afraid to do that. So, I just think Ziam has a lot of skill and a lot of talent. and he's a guy who's maybe doesn't have the same kind of physicality as Nazim. That's the one area I'm a little concerned about. But I feel like just the way that he fights, I feel like it's going to translate in this matchup. What do you think, man?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I think, should I give the prediction first or should I break it down first?
Hey, whichever way you prefer, my man.
All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I'm predicting for Ziam to get a first round knockout. I think it's very apparent to me that Nazim Sadykhov, outside of exchanges, he's very defensively sound, and I'll give him that. When he starts to exchange, you start to see a lot of the wide body hooks, and the head is on the center line. And you see in the Moto fight, that's how he got caught, and that's how he got dropped initially. And then he was defensively sound when he wasn't throwing anything against the cage, and that's why the fight didn't get stopped, even though most refs would have stopped that. Now doing that, but also trying to close distance. When you're at a 6-inch reach disadvantage, that's a problem, my friend. I think it's going to be very tough for him to get on the inside for Ziam. Ziam's really good at keeping his length with his jabs. And he has slowly been racking up these wins, without people really talking about him too much, flying under the radar, starting to land some powerful shots and hurting guys and finding his finishes. Sure, he could win by submission here too, because you could always hurt him on the feet, club and sub, or hurt him. Nazim shoots a lazy takedown, gets front headlocked, one of those chokes. But I do think that it's a round 1 knockout or round 2 knockout for Ziam. Pretty confident in this take, and I'm a fan of Nazim's, and if he wants to win here, he's going to try and take this fight to the ground. But I do also trust for us here to be the better grappler here, and the length will help him here to back. Might go night-night. So I think it's for Ziam through and through.
Yeah, my guy Nate, very sharp guy in the chat, has pointed out, obviously, Ziam hasn't knocked anyone out in the UFC except Matt Frivola, right? But the one thing I will note is that, when you look at what was the Nazim fight, it was against Evan Elder. He got knocked down. He got knocked down against Nicholas Mota. So again, chinny, I think, would be a strong word. I don't think Nazim is chinny. I just think Nazim takes big chances. He's a guy who's willing to take one to give one, and kind of throw heavies in the pocket, and really exchange. And I just feel like Ziam a little bit more sniper, a little bit more movement, a little bit more footwork. And I do think he can kind of pick some spots with the long range strikes using that reach and that length. And I also think, those knees, those big shots, they kind of open up with the height differential. So those are the reads that I have. But ultimately, I will acknowledge, Nazim's a tough guy, man. It's not going to be easy to get him out of there. But I think you also mentioned, you hurt somebody. If they're a really tough guy, you put them in a choke. You know why? Because there's no tough guy in a choke. You go to sleep like anybody else, right? I think Elder and Mota throw a little harder than Ziam. I think that that's fair. But I also think, they both have different attributes, right?
Power.
They have different attributes. Yeah, it's about precision beats power and timing beats speed. Shout out to Conor McGregor.
my brothers, it's not about the power always. I think it's the shots that you don't see. And when Aziz crashed into the pocket and throwing wide, and Ziam is countering down the middle, it's just timing. If you hit the button, you're out.
One thing I do want to note, shout out to my guy on X at Testudo1111. He posts, a bunch of random stuff. So, this is not a full-throated endorsement, right? I don't look at every tweet, but every week he posts the DK salaries, and then it's juxtaposed with the ITD prices and certain things like that. The one thing I just wanted to note for people, because I always find it interesting for DFS purposes, is fighters that are priced as the underdog in their matchup, right? They have the lower salary. but they have a better price to win the fight inside the distance. And I will just note Nazim Sadykhov does fit the criteria for that, priced at 7.9K on DK, but he is also looking at about a plus 225 ITD price tag. Meanwhile, you're looking at closer to a plus 4XX price tag on the Ziam side. So the bookmaker is giving a little bit more credence to, hey, if Nazim wins this fight, he's probably got to get it done with his power, get the knockout or potentially a submission, right? We have seen Ziam submitted before in the UFC, whereas maybe they're, still not believers in the Ziam power, but they can be converted this weekend, right? Some other fighters that fit the bill, Bruno Ferreira is one that does fit the bill, right? He's a fighter who's priced at 8K compared to 8.2K for Vettori, but he does have the stronger ITD price. No surprise, as all of his wins as a professional are inside the distance, right? That's how he likes to get it done. And on the other side, I think the next fight that we're going to talk about is another fight that qualifies. So as we move to that one, we could talk about the underdog here, Carini Silva, who's just slightly priced higher, plus 325 compared to plus 375 for the favorite, Maycee Barber, to win this fight inside the distance. You've got Maycee Barber. Oh, she's been having some of these health events, man. Pulled out of 2 recent bookings, been dealing with some stuff. And Carini Silva on the other side, just been having some lackluster performances, right? She arguably could have lost her last fight, right? That's a little bit concerning. And then you look at the fight before that, and loses basically just cardio-based decision against Viviane Araújo, where she slows down massively and doesn't have it in the later portions of that fight. So I feel like both these women have something that they need to prove coming into this fight. Obviously, youth on the side of Barber here at 27 years of age, but Carini Silva, the better jiu-jitsu player, I don't think there's any question about that. Certainly the more credentialed jiu-jitsu player. It comes down to, does her physicality translate against somebody like Barber, who is extremely physically strong, but kind of muscles her way and horses her way through positions rather than being super technical? So, Wiz, what do you think about this one, my man? We'll send it over to you. How do you feel, brother? Weird matchup. Only WMMA fight on the card. Let's see if it's a violent one.
Yeah, I think this fight ends in disappointment. I think we're going to be very disappointed watching this fight. I think it's going to be very slow paced because both these girls are going to be scared to engage with one another. Maycee Barber is going to be very aggressive on the feet, trying to get this fight to the clinch, but then Carini is going to try and threaten with takedowns. If she lands this fight to the ground, Maycee has shown the tendency, like you said, to just try to force and muscle her way out of positions. And early on, that's going to be trouble while they're dry. I think Carini could take advantage of positions like that. So it'll be advantageous for her to take this fight down to the mat as soon as possible. But if she finds herself on the feet with Maycee, I think she's going to get bullied. In the clinch, she'll get bullied. And what she's notorious for is the gas tank. She gasses out. And if that still holds true, and the fighting nerds game plan has not the camp has not helped her in terms of cardio, I think Maycee can probably find a finish here in round 2 or round 3, whether in the striking or whether off a failed takedown from Carini Silva, and then Maycee gets on top and beats her up. I think both of those are viable options, and I think there's some value on Maycee Barber inside the distance here. So that's my prediction, round 2, round 3 for Maycee Barber.
Interesting, man. Yeah, I don't mind that breakdown at all. Before I looked back into Maycee Barber, I liked her more in this fight. And then I looked back into it and I'm like, man, she's had some sketchy ass decisions in the UFC. And she's also just been a girl who struggled with the health, right? She lost as a massive favorite against Roxanne because she tore her ACL in the fight. And it's just like, against somebody like Carini Silva, she literally destroyed Ketlin Souza's knee in the first round. Of all the people to go with when you're, experiencing some, frailty and injury proneness, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm not trying to disparage her. She's clearly very tough, but I just mean she can get physically injured, right? Or she can also deal with, health problems, right? Sickness, whatever it is. And so we wish her nothing but the best health-wise, but that does make it hard to trust somebody to go out there and win a fight, right? Where, you could be your own worst enemy, right? You got to beat yourself before you can beat an opponent. So I think that Carini Silva, what she does well is that she hits hard. I saw Moyes in the chat saying Silva KO 20-1. You know, she doesn't throw a lot. When she throws everything into it, right? She kind of winds up, throws big, heavy shots, and then she likes to mix it up on the mat. I would say she's like almost a better version of 125 Mayra Buena Silva, right? Like, you know, she also has the same cardio concerns, but she can go out there and bang it out a little bit on the feet, throw some heavy shots, and then she also has really credible jiu-jitsu when she can take it to the ground. So for me, I think that Silva's path to winning this fight is a submission, you know, or a knockout, I suppose. You know, shout out to my guy Moyes. I would look at the ITD. I think that the way I'd like this fight is fight not to go the distance, because I could see early on in the fight Silva latching onto a sub. She's got a very good guillotine choke. She commits to it 100%. You know, she's got those dangerous leg locks. I could see her committing to those. But the other thing is, if she commits to that offense and then ends up on bottom, Macy Barber is violent with her ground and pound. She's one of the more violent women in the UFC when she's able to get her game going. And I do think her confidence would build tremendously if she saw her opponent gassing out in front of her. So I feel like, you know, we saw Amanda Ribas, who's a talented grappler, who's a skilled, you know, positional player who has her submission ability. She got beat up physically by Macy Barber in that fight. And I feel like that is Macy's path here. So I feel like plus 175 on the fight not to go kind of gives you some equity on both of these women, gives you a chance on both of them. And then also it kind of covers the biggest downside risk of both. Now, the one thing I will say is Karine Silva did manage to hang on to a decision against Vivi Araujo, but I don't think Vivi has a finish in the UFC. I'd have to go back and look, maybe one way, way back. But certainly it would have been a long time for Vivi since she had put somebody away. So I feel like Macy Barber, much more violent and honestly, you know, just much more physically primed than somebody like Viviane Araujo. Anything you want to add before we move to the next one?
Yeah, she lost that fight against Dione Barboza. I truly think that Karine still lost that fight. She got outlanded there in the striking. I felt like Dione landed the bigger shots in that fight. But
I mushed Dione. I'm sorry. I mushed her.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this fight. It should be fun. I was joking about the fight ending in disappointment for this one. I think there's opportunities for finishes here in both. So I do like that number on the fight doesn't go distance. But I do think it's actually Macy here. She looked great on the scale. She looked huge, man. It's the first time I've seen her look this good, and she was ripped.
Awesome. And I if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to double check this. So don't crucify me if I get this one wrong, internet. But I believe she was dating Yusuf Zalal, and Zalal has been on an absolute tear since he came back to the UFC. So we could be on the brink of another UFC power couple if all is well in that relationship. But if I'm wrong there, then forget I said anything at all. And we can move to the next one, which is Terrence McKinney and Chris Duncan.
Shout out my guy Yusuf Zalal, putting the Arabs on the map.
The goat, dude, the Moroccan devil. How easy was that submission against Josh Emmett? What was it, like 90 seconds or something? He was like step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. Thanks for playing. Easy as pie. But man, this one, talk about a fight that might be over, you know, early. Very violent fighters juxtaposed on this one, man. Two guys that are kill or be killed at their core. Certainly Chris Duncan more proven in fights that go the distance. Terrence McKinney, he's never been, man. He is the archetypal kill or be killed fighter. He likes to get to business early and often. Then he goes in his interviews. He's like, man, I want to go and win a decision here. It's just like, all right, let's see what to expect from this guy. But, man, we'll have you start us off here, my man. What do you think of this fight? Who do you think gets it done in the lightweight classic that's brewing here on the prelims?
Interesting fight. You know, Chris Duncan has sort of been on a tear. He's been an underdog in his past few fights and upset Rebecki, upset Chanich, Bolagioki was the one right before it. Also underdog in that fight. And you know, people are starting to forget how chinny this guy was. I mean, you look at his Contender Series fights, you know, Slava Klaus put him out brutally. And then against Charlie Campbell, also was about to get put out brutally. We both had a lot of money on Mr. Charlie Campbell in that one. And somehow, Chris Duncan on death's door lands a clean one, puts him out cold. That was still one of the biggest jaw drop moments in my betting career. I was just looking at the screen and I was in utter disbelief. But moving on from that, people are forgetting that Chris Duncan still is that same chinny guy, but has evolved a lot as a fighter ever since he's gone to American Top Team and has a lot of solid training partners there. So you got to give him credit. Is as tough as nails. And Terrence McKinney, another guy who we're used to seeing get finished by knockout brutally in the first round early on. So I think this fight is going to end up in a car crash. In interviews, you hear Duncan saying that I'm going to go out there and try to take this guy's head off, and then McKinney saying the exact opposite. I'm going to make it boring and make this fight go to decision. I think there's only one way this fight goes, and it's going to be car. That's the only way these guys know how to fight. If Duncan's the one going out there and forcing it out of McKinney, it's going to happen that way. And if McKinney's out there shooting takedowns, Duncan's going to try and shoot gillies. That's his game. And he's pretty damn good at it. So I really wouldn't trust any side. Duncan was a bigger favorite earlier on in the week, around minus 150 to 160. Now steam all the way down to McKinney being a favorite at one point, minus 120. A lot of people are trying to say it's Duncan injury. Come on, let's not think every alignment is injury. That happened over a series of days, not 1 hour. So let's put some brakes on that joke. I just truly think that this is a coin flip. I personally will always choose the fighter that comes from a camp and going to be Chris Duncan. Am I confident? No. Am I putting my money on this fight? Absolutely not. Why would I ever want to do that to myself and give myself a heart attack? It's a true coin flip, and just enjoy the fight. I think one guy's going to get finished in the first round, and he's going to be happy. And I just think that's going to be Chris Duncan. So give me Duncan here by first round knockout from Scotland.
There you go, man. Listen, fool me one time, shame on me. Fool me, can't get fooled again. Chris Duncan is a hard guy to put away, man. The guy's got a really strong will to fight. He's a guy that really believes in himself. He's a guy that really fights hard. Now, the one thing that you can't be a tough guy about is a choke. We talked about it before. Look at the Manuel Torres fight, right? Like, Chris Duncan is willing to get his face cut. He's willing to get hit hard. He's willing to get knocked down and get back up. You put them in a chokehold, they're either going to tap or they're going to go to sleep. It's just it's as simple as it goes, right? If it's really locked in there. And, I think that for Terrence McKinney, he's got the Ziam win. He's got, the ability to go out there, Slava claws, put him away, right? Got him in his choke series, did it fast, did it, in devastating fashion. So Terrence McKinney can be a dominant, grappler, can be a guy that goes out there and gets finishes. Also, 7-second knockout against Matt Frevola. The guy does have the ability to hurt people, land big shots, knock people out. So for me, this fight just has violence written all over it. The one thing I will say, though, is if you were to say, Liam, you have to assign a favorite in this fight, because I do think it should be lined pretty closely. My gut instinct would say it would be Chris Duncan. And the reason being is because I think I trust his will to win. I trust his process over 15 minutes. He can fight. Even the Omar Morales fight. Was it disgusting? Yes. Did he know how to win the fight? Yeah. Hold him against the fence, make it boring, do what he needed to. Like, Chris Duncan just finds ways to win fights, more often than not, right? Mateusz Rebecki, that's not an easy guy to go out there and fight with, right? He's got skills in different positions. He's a guy that can hit hard. He's a guy that can get to his wrestling. He's a guy that knows jiu-jitsu. And Chris Duncan just made it a really rough night at the office for him. And Terrence McKinney's a big guy, athletic guy, moves fast, but every time he gets extended, shit goes sideways for him. And the problem is he can get knocked out brutally in the first round too. It's not like he's got, an iron chin or like he's invincible or something. Esteban Ribovic kicked him damn near into the third row. And Ismail Bonfim, the knee was like devastating, right? Like, yeah, that could have knocked out anybody. but he was also ready to go. Like, yes, the knee was devastating, but he was ready to go. That was the problem, right? It's like he was already spent, and I had Bonfim. I had Bonfim round 2, and it was just like when Terrence McKinney takes on a guy who does not deserve to be in there with him, a guy who just doesn't have skills, he's going to run through them. He's going to make them look like an amateur because he's got the athleticism and the skills to do that. But when he goes in there and he meets real resistance, it just normally falls apart. And for me, that's the thing that I expect, unfortunately, here. So, I didn't think that there was anything suspect about the line in this fight because Terrence McKinney, his upside in this fight is round 1. And so if you think somebody's going to come out and win the first round and dominate in round 1, then you probably want to get in your equity now, before the fight starts. Because if they starch them in 2 minutes, the live opportunity won't exist. But if the fight starts the second round, then I think that the live line will be switching heavily to Chris Duncan. And it's because he's shown he can go out there and fight for 15 minutes. That's not a problem for him. He is an extremely disciplined guy in terms of his work ethic and everything else. So not saying that McKinney's not, but McKinney throughout his whole career has never shown the ability to go 15 hard minutes of fighting. And Duncan's done it multiple times, UFC level, pre-UFC. He's just gone out there and done it. So I feel like Duncan is the guy who's shown that he can do it longer. He can do it when it gets tough. He can do it in the trenches. And Terrence McKinney can do it when things go well. He is a really good hammer. He is just not a great nail on the receiving end. So for me, I feel like violence is the answer. And I feel like Duncan, especially the longer the fight goes, the better an outcome it's going to be for him, because I just think his process works better for longer. But yeah, man, I don't really have a super strong take on a side, except just to say, like, ABC say always bet on cardio for me. And that's the one thing that I think Duncan has as like a clear advantage here. Yeah, and Cameron says my first exposure to McKinney was him dominating Sean Woodson and then instantly dying. He literally wins every second. He's taking him down, stands up, flying knee. Thanks for playing. It's over. Yeah, just crazy.
I don't want to remember that.
Nobody does. Nobody does. Slender Man got one there. He got one there. It was brutal. But Terrence McKinney, I will say, has looked a lot more focused and dialed in his recent camps and everything else. So we're praying for the guy that he can put it all together. Maybe one day show a 15-minute Terrence Magomedov performance. But seeing is believing when it comes to Terrence, because, what is it, 24 fights deep? He's never gone 15 minutes once. So my man's shown what he likes to do. He likes to go out there and get it done early. All right. Speaking of guys who like to get it done early, Manuel Torres has been out of the first round just one time in his 19-fight professional career. It was a 3-round split decision victory in 2018. And other than that, it is kill or be killed in round 1. Grant Dawson on the other side, if you want to criticize him, you criticize him for getting decisions. You criticize him for being a little bit chinny. But aside from that, the guy's process has been aces. 11-1-1 in the UFC. That's 13 fights. That's a really good winning percentage, right? That's a guy who just knows how to go out there and do it. Dawson only losses happen to be round 1. That's hilarious. So yeah, 2 guys that, both like to win and lose in round 1, I suppose, huh? But no, Dawson certainly more of a extended fighter, likes to get to the decision, but also likes to beat up on people over the course of the fight, take the will out of them, really sap their energy. And the thing that impressed me was when Grant Dawson was able to submit Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon is a guy who really doesn't want to give it up. He's a really tough guy. He knows jiu-jitsu, credible on the mat. And normally you got to beat the will out of him. You got to really beat up Jared. And you got to hurt him. And I just thought it was so impressive how Grant was able to beat him up. Same thing with Hopper Garcia. To beat those guys, yeah, you could do that. But to just go out there and maul them, dominate them, beat them up, just cut them up from the top position. He's doing a lot of damage when he's on that spot. And I feel like Manuel Torres, the things that he does well, he's athletic. He knows where he's good. He wants to be on the feet. He tries to make really big damage happen in short sequences, big elbows, big knees, putting huge shots on people. But I'll go back to the Colton England fight where I bet him by knockout, or I bet him to win that fight by knockout. He poked that guy right in the eye, and then the guy turns away, and then he just follows up with some big shots and gets him out of there, right? Fair play. But then you watch when he's fighting Ignacio Bahamondes, like another guy who really knows how to strike and another guy who's big, he kind of just got clowned a little bit in that fight. Like he just looked like he was 10 steps behind him. So Manuel Torres is like an athleticism bully as far as I'm concerned. Like the guy is a freak athlete. He's really big and strong. The Chris Duncan fight shows you everything you need to know about that. First, 90 seconds, he comes out there, they're, swinging back and forth, just doing crazy takedowns like it's a middle school wrestling match. They both get back up to the feet. He grabs like a gift wrap, throws him backwards, jumps on his back and chokes him. It was awesome. Was it super replicable? Like if he fights Chris Duncan 10 times, is that going to happen again? Like I'm not sure. Maybe it could happen 1 or 2 more times, but it just feels to me like Manuel Torres is one of these guys that, he's a fun fighter. He's a good TV fighter. He's 30 years of age. Maybe he can find a way to put it all together. But I don't know that he could fight a full 15 minutes. I've never seen this guy in a good extended fight. I've seen him look kind of suspect, even in these fights where he's winning, where he's getting hit, he's getting touched, he's getting hit clean, and then he kills the guy with a big elbow. It's like, yes, it looks awesome, but it doesn't tell me that it's going to translate as he moves up. Shout out to my guy, Nate. Torres does have good hips and positional awareness. Yes, he's actually got a good offensive grappling game as well. I feel like that's going to be to his detriment here. I feel like he might be like, hey, what if I go for my guillotine? What if I get a little cute here? Fall to his back looking for something. And Grant Dawson's just very heavy on top and really understands what he wants in those positions. I feel like if this is a fight about who's more athletic and who's more, dangerous on the feet, Manuel Torres is going to, smash him. But if this is a fight about who makes better decisions on the mat, I think Grant Dawson's going to run away with it. So for me, I lean more towards the Grant Dawson side of things. But again, this is another fight where I would be a little bit surprised if we saw the scorecards here, unless Grant Dawson's just, cover to cover, riding this guy from the hips. Because otherwise, I feel like, excuse me, you can't really trust Grant's chin against a guy, excuse me, who hits this hard and has, his own submission game. So it's not like if Grant is like super hurt, he can just shoot a takedown and bail himself out. I feel like Grant's got to be clear and sober-minded, get to his takedowns. And if he does that, I feel like he should kind of run roughshod from the top position, honestly. How about you, my man? Anything you want to add before we move to the next one?
Well, with this one, I really feel like it's Nebraska Khabib or pass. You look at Grant Dawson, he, is shown to have some, fragility with his chin and durability early on in the fight. But if we're counting on just one shot, then I think more often than not, at minus 200, I'm willing to take those chances. The guy that has a really good process, has really good control on the mat, and is able to just follow his game plan through and through. And I think he finishes Manuel Torres in the second round of this fight. Manuel Torres has the opportunity out in the first couple of minutes. So if you can find a market that will give you Manuel Torres and the fight under half a round, I think that's, the most value you can get on the Torres side, because I think if he finds a finish, it'll come that early before the first takedown. But once Dawson lands the first takedown, he could find a finish early on in the first round as well. So fight ends in the first round for either guy is also tempting. I'll be looking into those markets a little bit more.
If you believe in happy wife, happy life, Ellie Dawson just won her fight tonight as well via split decision. So hopefully Grant is now, feeling a little bit relaxed. All right, my wife got it done. She won her fight. Now I can go focus on my fight and go get the job done. Hopefully that is what we see for KGD Grant Dawson. But honestly, either way, man, I just hope we see some violence here. I think Manuel Torres, fun guy. You know how he's going to approach the fight, violence at all costs. And Grant Dawson, a guy who looked like he was on a, top 5, top 10 type of trajectory in terms of his wins and how he was putting it all together. And then everything got halted by that main event loss against Bobby Green. Now he's back on a pay-per-view, big opportunity here to close out the year. I think he could put himself in a really good position to start 2026 if he goes out there and finishes Manuel Torres. And I do expect him to do that if he's able to avoid that first round knockout that Manuel Torres is very fond of. Oh, boy. Next up, we've got a very contentious matchup here, my man. Jan Blachowicz, the former champion, Polish power, taking on Bogdan Guskov, a guy who has been having success since coming to the UFC. He's certainly dealt with adversity in some of his fights, but a guy who's shown a willingness to deal with that, come back, find his own shots, find his own moments. Even in the Volkan Ozdemir fight where he did lose, he landed some shots on the feet. He just got beat to the punch and he got smoked a little bit. Once he got hurt, Volkan's killer instinct, was what separated there. But I think that this is a fun fight. I think, Jan Blachowicz hasn't finished somebody in a long time, but Bogdan Guskov is a guy that kind of makes you fight him, right? One way or the other. He takes a lot of risks. He's a big counterpunch guy. He likes to, swing his chin in there, pull it back, and throw. And, Jan Blachowicz is a guy who knows how to strike. So I think this could be a banger. I think this could be a fight where either guy tries to sneak in their grappling and get it going. I know that people respect Jan Blachowicz as a grappler, as they should. Very talented guy, but he's 42 going on 43. He's a guy that did tap before the choke was fully applied against Glover Teixeira because he had a surgically repaired neck. He's a guy that's pulled out of 2 bookings in the last 3 years because of major injuries, shoulder injury, neck injury. Not things that you want to go grapple, with some young guy who's pulling on you and trying to squeeze your head and your neck, if that's the case, right? So Bogdan Guskov is a little bit too aggressive on the mat. That's what got his guard passed against Ryan Spann, but he is a guy that trains jiu-jitsu. He is a guy that's very aggressive on the mat, and I don't think it's one-way traffic in any position on this fight. I think Jan Blachowicz is the better skilled fighter, but he's 42, right? Timing is everything in MMA as far as I'm concerned. And I think prime Jan Blachowicz would be a clear favorite against Bogdan Guskov. But I do worry about Jan Blachowicz because, number one, he's been very inactive lately. And the guys he's fighting are guys who are age peers, older guys. And I do think that Bogdan Guskov is a fast guy on the feet that throws crazy shots, takes big chances, throws from weird angles, and he can hit and hurt you. He's also a guy that showed against Billy Elikana, he's willing to take what you give. You want to put your neck out there, no problem. You want to play that game, okay. And he also showed defensive awareness there, right? Billy was on his back. He defended, turned in, got out, and then was able to deal with it, right? I think that in this fight, Jan, again, skills can pay the bills early on, but I do question the cardio. That's something that tends to go as fighters get older. I'm not sure, what that's going to look like for him. I know people are worried about Guskov's cardio. I don't know that I could trust Jan's cardio either. I know that he fought with Olberg, but he didn't have to worry about the grappling at all really in that fight. It was just, hey, let's go out there and have a slow-paced kickboxing match. And, I felt like he was willing to acquiesce to those terms. Bogdan is just a little bit different because he's so wild. He just fights like an absolute insane lunatic, right? And moving in and out, being very erratic and being hard to read. And I do think that Jan Blachowicz, he can have success with his low kicks. He can have success with some of his longer strikes. But I just worry about Jan getting hit, getting hurt, falling apart, getting injured, like getting tired. I worry about all those things at his age and where he's at in the game. So how do you feel about this one, Wiz? Do you feel more confident in our guy, Polish Power? Does he have one more in the tank?
I'm not really confident on either side here. I do lean Guskov's side just due to the age parity and the speed and athleticism. Jan Blachowicz, obviously the much more polished UFC record here and strength of schedule advantage all goes to him, but he's 42 and it's a 9-year age gap, almost a full 10 years. You have the faster striker, the more powerful striker in Guskov, who is mixing in the grappling here and there. But then Jan Blachowicz also can land clean in this fight and could potentially hurt Guskov on the feet. I think his biggest weapon here will be zapping Guskov's legs with the leg kicks. Now, let's see if we can even get as much volume out of Jan as we expect him to have low volume. But we do see Guskov bring out the fight in most of his opponents, and that's what really leads them to get finished. They start to get a little bit overwhelmed, and it throws off their game plan, and then Guskov finds the kill shot, and he's starting to play into the character a little bit, dressed up as the hitman to the press conference. He's playing the role, and he seems very confident. And you love to see it for the young 205er. So for me, I think I lean Guskov, but I don't really want to, put my chips in just yet. I feel like this is a prove it spot more than anything, and then I can reassess moving forward.
Yeah, the thing about Guskov is he has been, basically a dog in many of his UFC appearances, right? He was a dog against Volkan Ozdemir. I bet him there like plus 165 based on his regional tape, based on the fact that I was like, man, this guy comes in, he swings hard, he looks like he's willing to engage. He's going to, go out there and make it a fight. He got smoked, right? And then you see his very next fight. He goes out there against Zach Pauga. He's a similar price to what he is right now. And that's hilarious, right? Like same price against Pauga as against Blachowicz. But obviously, again, timing is everything in MMA. Goes out there, he knocks out Pauga in the first round. Then he's plus 170 against Ryan Spann. He goes out there, he finishes Ryan Spann in the second round, knocks him out as well. And I was able to cash in that fight, get my money back, get my lick back. Shout out to Bogdan Guskov. And after he beat Zach Pauga, I remember he said, first UFC win, better than sex. That's why this guy is a legend forever. So you look at Bogdan Guskov and, again, minus 400 against Billy Elikana. That was a short notice fight, if I remember correctly. And then Nikita Krylov, he's again plus 170. He absolutely smokes Nikita Krylov and knocks him out. So, the one thing that Dominic Cruz noted on commentary when this guy was fighting, he's very accurate with his headshots. The guy throws from wild angles and he does things that look goofy and he takes big chances because he keeps his hands down and he moves his head in and out. But when he throws, he does tend to land and connect with shots that matter on the chin. And he hurts guys, he rocks guys, he wobbles guys. And light heavyweights tend to be a little bit, on the lower end, especially outside the rankings and things like this. But it does feel to me like Bogdan Guskov has, the kind of skills that can let him compete in this division that is a little bit thin. And Jan Blachowicz is a guy that is very skilled and very talented, but he hasn't landed 100 significant strikes since a 5-rounder with Izzy, in 2021. And, I just feel like Bogdan Guskov, if he's getting off on his game, if he's getting off with his movement and his footwork, I could see him landing volume. I could see him landing a knockout blow. I could see him potentially mixing it up in the grappling. So for me, it just feels like a fight where either guy could win. And so it would be a dog or pass type situation for me. All right. Anything you want to add with the light heavyweights, my man?
No, to be honest, with this fight, I really am looking forward to just assessing the performance of Guskov and then seeing how he ranks against, people in the next tier of the light heavyweight division. Although he's a little bit older, Jan, but it still is a prove it spot to me. So I'm really excited to see if he can take this step up in competition and pass with flying colors like I expect him to. And then we'll see how we can take his career moving forward.
I love it. Next up, my man, we've got Triple C, another retirement fight on the horizon, the retirement of both Cejudo and his coach, Santino DeFranco. I will note Santino said, Henry's not here to be a walkover for anybody, man. He's going to go out there and win this last one and ride off into the sunset. Obviously, what's Santino going to say? My guy's going to go out there and lose. He's going to get smoked. But I did think it was interesting because Santino normally just says like, hey, I can't comment on my guy because he's fighting. And because he's walking away, he's like, fuck it. I'm going to say what I actually think on this one. And, he's bullish on Henry's chances. And I just can't feel the same way, man. I feel like what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing from Henry is a guy who doesn't want to be there, unfortunately. And maybe I'm misreading that, but it sounds like the last place that Henry wants to be is in a cage fight of any kind. It's talking about I shouldn't have came back at all. Just doesn't really sound like the right mindset to come in there and get in a fight in a cage for money. And could he win? Yeah, he's got skills. He's got abilities. He's a long-term, top level guy at his best, one of the best game competitors out there, period. Was he better than Mighty Mouse? No. Did he find a way to win? Just by a hair, just by an inch, right? Henry was the ultimate competitor. I don't think he was the best wrestler in the Olympics either, but he found a way to get his damn hand raised. He's a great competitor. I just don't think he's got the same fire burning in his heart anymore. I think Peyton Talbot is a guy that really wants to win and get better. I think he was humbled and embarrassed by that loss that he took against Johnny Barcelos. And the one difference for me between Cejudo and Barcelos is that Cejudo, great fighter, great wrestler, but a guy that's moved way more into his striking as he's gotten older. And Howdy's gone the other way. He's like, I will lean on this wrestling if I need to. I will lean on this grappling. I will teach you a lesson by taking you down and holding you down using my jiu-jitsu. And I just don't think Henry's, a jiu-jitsu guy like that. He's a wrestler to his core, and then he's a guy who knows how to strike on the feet, and he's not afraid to do that. So I feel like Henry would rather do karate and boxing with Peyton Talbot than he would jiu-jitsu. And for that reason, I can't really trust him to go out there and put together a winning game plan. What do you think?
You look at this fight and you have to recall the history of Peyton Talbot going and training with Cejudo for some time. And apparently Cejudo is saying that Talbot was also supposed to be someone that he was going to help build in the UFC. And Talbot really told him to fuck off. He didn't want to pursue that path. So I feel like Henry was a little bit insulted by that. Now, talking about the fight specifically here, obviously Henry is way out of his prime. It's his retirement fight. Doesn't seem like he wants to be there at all. He's at a 6-inch disadvantage, at a reach disadvantage in this fight as well. And I think at a speed and striking disadvantage completely. If he wants to stay safe, he's going to try and employ that wrestling as much as he can, but he's never been known to be that control wrestler later on in his career. He's, like you said, more leaning into his striking than anything. It's going to spell trouble here, and I think at some point, Payne's going to hurt Henry, and I think Henry's going to look for the door. I hate saying this because I know he is a competitor to the nth degree. I just feel like he is going to shell up if he gets hurt at any point, and this fight's going to get called. I have an inclination into believing that. I think Payne Talbot's going to find a kill shot here and severely compromise Henry Cejudo at some point in this fight, whether it's in the second or the third round, could be in the first. But I think it's Payne Talbot by KO here. If you can find in the plus 300s, good value.
Yeah, I mean, the sequence against Song Yadong was a little bit weird, right? If you remember the sequencing of that fight, he gets poked, then there's a stoppage, just a non-stoppage, they go to the round, they come back out, then they call the fight out. It was fucking ridiculous. But ultimately, man, I just look at, much respect for Henry, right? One of my favorite guys, super underappreciated guy. His legacy has kind of been, tarnished by some of the results on his back half of this run, right? He hasn't really been winning fights lately. And so would it be nice to see him go out on a win? Like in some regard, yeah, but I just don't think he wants it for himself anymore. I feel like he's made his money. He's had his time in the sun. He's been a champion and he's ready to ride off in the sunset. So just can't trust him here. I think Peyton Talbot should win. I think he's live by all methods, and I'll just leave it there. All right, man. Next up, we got my guy, Tatsuro Taira, taking on Brandon Moreno. I'll let you lead us off on this one, my man. What do you think of these flyweights? How do you think it goes down between the former champion and the potential future champion, Tatsuro Taira?
I'm going to start with this, and if we think back to, I say this 4 years ago, do you guys believe that the UFC was looking to get rid of the flyweight division, and the whole talk was, all right, we're trading away Demetrius Johnson because we're getting rid of this division? And what we get in return, I mean, God bless him. I'm glad he's doing a lot better now than Askren. But, in terms of a UFC product, we didn't get too much out of Brent Askren. And then now we look at the flyweight division, and it's one of the most exciting divisions that we have on the roster. And I believe skill for skill, this is the best division to watch. They have to have the speed to match with the defense, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, and the striking. You cannot lack any of those arts and compete in the flyweight division in the top 5 level, or you're going to get steamrolled because these guys are legit good, skill for skill. So props to both of these guys. They measure up identically to each other here. And Brandon Moreno is someone who has been champ and has been at the top of the game for such a long time and is good everywhere this fight goes. He will obviously have the advantage here in the striking. He's going to be the faster and more creative striker that picks up the striking in multiple levels, using his knees to the body, kicks, and he will be just a much better boxer of the two fighters. And we've seen Taira get boxed up in a couple of his fights in the past. But then you look at the Taira side, and what his game plan is going to be is to take this fight down to the mat. I just, if we didn't have so many miles on the career of Brandon Moreno, I would be a little bit more confident with this take and saying that, yeah, I do believe he'll be able to scramble every single time that Taira gets him down and get back to his feet and, keep this fight on the feet where he should have the advantage. But I think that the younger guy here, the stronger grappler, the more physical of the two, in Taira, will find extended periods on the mat where he can take advantage of the grappling here of Brandon Moreno. I'm not saying Brandon Moreno is a bad grappler. I'm just saying Taira is that much better of a grappler than Brandon Moreno. If Brandon is not finding the ability to scramble, I think this fight is over within 2 rounds and Taira finds a submission. If Moreno is able to scramble and Taira finds no success in the takedowns, I'm going to instantly live bet Brandon Moreno for the sole reason that I think on the feet, this is all day Brandon Moreno. I think he's going to be that much faster than Taira. And Brandon Moreno has a history of confusing fighters in the striking and shooting random takedowns and then mixing it back up with the knees up to the middle, faking you down. I do think that it's close, and I think the fight is lined accurately, but I lean Taira's direction just for the youth and the style of fighting.
Yeah, I think we're going to slightly disagree here just because I'm not 100% sold that Brandon Moreno is going to be the better striker on the night. And I do think he's a little bit more crafty. I think he's probably the more skilled striker, but striking is about, at the end of the day, being effective. And I feel like Tatsuro Taira's got big hands. He's got big kicks. He can hit people and he can hurt people. And Brandon Moreno's got a 4-5 knockdown ratio in the UFC. He's been knocked down 5 times. He's been knocked down 3 times in one fight before. And people talk about his durability. He's a hard guy to put away, no doubt about it. But he's been cut up. He's been busted up. He's been wearing the damage. He's been wearing it more lately in his career, in my humble opinion. And I think it's cost him optically in some of these decisions. The fact that he's getting cut up, the fact that he's getting damaged up, his face is wearing it. I don't think that helps him, right? And Tatsuro Taira on the other side, he's got a 3-1 knockdown ratio in the UFC. Granted, has not been fighting quite as high a level of competition. We can grant that. But you look at what does he offer? He is a guy who's 25 years of age, going on 26, and he's already had 18 professional experiences. He's a guy that's gone out there, finished 13 of his 17 professional victories, got power on the hands, right? If you watch his pre-UFC run, if you watch his regional run, he was dropping guys with the hands, fall him to the ground, submit him. And everybody was thinking, man, this guy's just got jiu-jitsu. And I knew he could punch. I knew he could strike. Carlos Hernandez had never been stopped with strikes in 28 fights, professional or amateur, right? He fought Olivas. He fought all these guys, right? He was a tough kid. He'd been in there with a lot of tough guys. And Tatsuro Taira put those mitts on him, and dude didn't know what had hit him, right? He was looking off in the distance, looking sideways, and Taira's got the finishing instincts, whether it's going to his submission arsenal, which is deep and varied, right? He's got triangles. He's got arm bars. He's got an ability to take the back and finish with chokes. And, Brandon Royval, in my opinion, is a similar archetype to Moreno in that he's very difficult to hold down on the ground. He's very difficult to get in extended scrambles with. And it takes very good guys, elite guys like Pantoja, to actually body triangle him and hold him down. And Tatsuro Taira was able to accomplish the same thing. A lot of people gave Taira grief for that loss. Man, he got hurt in that fight. Yes, he did. Did he punk out? Did he show, I don't want to be here? No, he bit down on his mouthpiece. He said, I can still come back. I can still win a round. I can still win this fight. Loses a split decision. One judge sees it another way. Tatsuro Taira gets his hand raised. He's undefeated in the UFC. And you look at that fight, in my opinion, there was nothing better that could happen for him. The weight of being undefeated, that's tough. Sean Brady's talked about it. Other guys, if you're undefeated every time, it's like, man, I just got to protect this undefeated record. That gets hard, man. It's a weight. It's a burden. You lose one, it's like, all right, now I have the freedom to go out there and just fight and do my best. And whatever happens, happens. And I feel like Tatsuro Taira right now he's been getting the training in at elevation in Colorado, done his thing. He's gotten in great work in Japan. His ground game is sensational. So I feel like this kid at 25 years of age, going on 26, the experience checks out, the athleticism checks out, the frame is big for the division. He's a big guy. He hits hard. And I think that he's getting better every day. I think Brandon Moreno, he's one of these guys that expressed, the doubts in his mind. Hey, maybe I should retire. Maybe I should move on from this. He's seen the mountaintop. He's been there. And now he's come back. He's gotten a win over Albazi. Hats off to him, right? Nice win. Urseg, nice win. Hats off to him. But now, he's got a guy who is really hungry and hasn't been up there and hasn't had those big fights and really wants to get there. And I just feel like Tatsuro Taira, for me, he's been a prospect to watch. I talked about him as a future champion when he got to the UFC. And I feel like this guy is 1 or 2 fights away from potentially fighting for that belt. And what better way to signal you're ready than to beat a former champion? What better way to signal that you're up next than to finish a guy who's never been finished before in the UFC? That's what Tyra said at the press conference. He said, if I go out there and finish a guy in Brandon Moreno that nobody's ever finished before, then I think I have to be next for the title shot. And that's what I feel. I feel that if he can go out there and finish this guy, that's how he gets the ticket. And I think the way he does it is by putting a big hand on this guy, scrambling the brain a little bit. Brandon Moreno is a good decision maker, a good scrambler. If you scramble somebody's brain, you turn that brown belt or that black belt into a brown belt, into a purple belt, you knock him all the way back down the rungs. And I think that if Tyra can hit him, his ground and pound is good, man. If he can follow him to the ground, if he can get that body triangle in, I don't think he's just going to get to the top and try and look for sub. I think he's going to try and bash this guy's head in and then look for the sub when he can. And I think Tatsuro Taira is going to finish Brandon Moreno. So for me, Tatsuro Taira, that's the way I am going in this fight. And again, if I'm wrong about this one, I'll take my hat off and say, hey, Brandon Moreno, I was wrong. Congrats to you. You look at 2 sides of the coin here on my Bet MMA, because on the Tatsuro Taira side, I've made 20 units. On the Brandon Moreno side, I've lost about 3.5, 4 units. So, right, Brandon Moreno, you got me. You've gotten me before, all right? You got me, kid. Let's see if you can do it again, because I got my Japanese supernova, and he's coming for everything they said he couldn't have. Tatsuro Taira, boys, unite. We coming this weekend. Let's go. Let's go. That's the energy that I'm bringing. Anything that you want to add, my man?
I'm very happy. Thank you. I'm ready to hear that. And then, I'm excited for Tatsuro Taira. I think we've both kind of watched him since his rise, his first fight in the UFC, and back in the Man of the Library Spaces days. Ooh, for those who have been a part of that, shout out to y'all. That's the real MMA Twitter days. But yeah, I'm excited for Taira to get it done tomorrow.
Absolutely, man. That brings us, of course, to the flyweight championship fight, right? We've got a potential number 1 contenders bout in the featured spot. We've got the championship bout up next, my man. It's Alexandre Pantoja, a guy who's been disrespected, the Cannibal. Now he's getting the respect from the market, from the betting public. Everybody is giving him that love and respect, deservedly so. On the other side, Joshua Van, he's the guy that people believe in, myself included. I've tweeted out before, Joshua Van is a future world champion. Just looking at the way he fights, looking at the composure, for a guy at 24 years of age, so young, Joshua Van, Tatsuro Taira, Muhammad Makayev, these were the guys that just stood out as the next generation flyweights, right? The guys that were going to be competing for titles and in those top spots. Makayev, obviously, on the outside looking in right now, not for a lack of talent, right? But you just look at Joshua Van, he's the one who's up, next man up, right? Pantoja needs a new challenger. He's been washing away guys that are just signed into the UFC and just getting here. And obviously, Kyoji Horiguchi is waiting in the wings, right? Just got that big win, exploded on the scene, hit that underdog ticket for us. But now, we got to find out, who's getting that opportunity for Japan. Is it Kyoji Horiguchi? Is it Tatsuro Taira? Or is Joshua Van going to spoil the party on everybody, right? Is he going to take this belt and run away with it before anybody gets the chance? And you look at Pantoja, what has he done so well? the guy's back take is fucking sensational. The guy's back take is elite, right? Tatsuro Taira, I talked about his back take. It's sensational. Alexandre Pantoja, just as good, if not better, right? That's how good we're talking about with this guy. Taira does some things that are freaky in terms of the athleticism and the length. Pantoja, it's not about his length. It's not about his limbs. It's about his skill and his decision-making and his transitions and just knowing the next right thing to do and being mean about it and pulling hard. And the guy just knows the right push and pull when it comes to grappling. And that's one thing that is really hard to make up for in terms of time. Like Joshua Van has not been wrestling and grappling for a very long time. And some guys are just prodigies, right? BJ Penn, it didn't take him a long time. Derek Moneyberg, it didn't take him a long time, right? But you look at a lot of guys, right? It takes a long time to get good on the mat. It takes real time, effort, commitment. It's just not a natural skill set, right? There's some motions that are natural in life. There's some motions that aren't natural. It's not natural, to wrestle, grapple, make those right decisions. It takes time, to know what to do, to know the next right thing to do. And you look at a guy like Joshua Van, he does have a submission loss on his record in recent memory, right? Pantoja is a guy who's never been finished in martial arts. He's been fighting for a long time. He's 35. He's had 35 pro MMA fights. Could eventually these wheels fall off? Could he eventually get finished? Absolutely. And Van is definitely a guy who's live to do that. He's got power. He's got the ability to chip away at your body, to chip away at your cardio. But seeing is believing, right? Pantoja's never been put away. So it's certainly, you got to give him the credit and respect that this guy fights like a dog. He's hard to hit. He's hard to hurt. He's hard to put away. All true. Then you look at, okay, does he have power? Yes, he does. Pantoja hits hard, man. He can hurt people. He can bust them up. Okay, what about, does Pantoja have the ability to put guys away on the mat? Certainly he does. In every round, he's very dangerous. He could do it in the first round. He could do it in the second round. I think he could even extend it later on into the fight. He definitely gets tired as the fight goes on, but if he gets to a dominant position, the guy knows his sequencing. He knows his grips. He knows what he wants to do. So I think he's dangerous in every round to find a submission, honestly. But with that being said, I think Joshua Van is dangerous with his hands. I think he's dangerous with his ability to find blows that hurt guys, to take the wind out of them. I think he showed against Soroya, even if you bring a wrestling heavy approach the entire fight, he can D it up. He can anticipate and see you coming. But the difference between Soroya and, Pantoja is that Pantoja uses the first contact, the first exchange to try and create a back take. And Soroya tries to use it to create a takedown. And Van is really good at preventing the takedown. But we're going to find out if his back take defense has improved, because we've seen it exploited in the past and nobody's better at it than Pantoja. So you'd assume every day of this camp was spent drilling how to escape back takes, how to not allow guys in on your hips, right? But for a lot of these guys, they try and just focus on, hey, I'm going to bring my offense. I'm going to bring what brought me to the dance. And I do feel like if Van does that, he's got a chance to knock him out. He's got a chance to hurt him to the body, but he's also got, a insignificant chance that he just gets submitted in this fight, right? So I think, I like violence overall in this fight. Pantoja never been finished before, but when you're 35 and, fighting a lot and taking on some, tough challengers that really want it and they're hungry and they might be a little younger and faster and hit hard and can fight, deep into the fight. Josh Van doesn't have a lot of UFC finishes, but a lot of guys in the third round looked like they were absolutely ready to go home and they didn't want to be there anymore. And round 4, if that starts with Cody Durden or some of these other guys, I think they might have been like, hey, bro, you got it. We'll shake on that. Let's be done. You know what I'm saying? Just watching how those fights were materializing. And I feel like for Van, both of his losses as a professional were inside the distance. Like when this guy has lost before, he got viciously knocked out by Charles Johnson, who deserves the credit and respect for that. A guy that I hope gets an opportunity to earn a title shot of his own potentially coming up. And, for Pantoja, he's still a guy that's hungry to prove that he's still the best. And so I think Josh Van, he's hungry as shit. I think Alexandre Pantoja, he's still a hungry guy, man. He still wants it. He's still a bad man. So I think it's a great fight. I think both guys deserve to be here. You look at the price tags. I'm a guy that always will pique my eye at, you see two great fighters. One of them's a big plus money number, but ultimately the thing that jumped out here was just you can get violence in this fight at a reasonable price in some places. And for me, big disparities out there in the market if you look for opportunities. So I found a good price, and I'm hopeful that somebody will find a finish, right? If Pantoja gets finished for the first time, we'll take our hat off. We'll pour some out for him. And, if he goes out there and finishes Josh Van, we'll say, hey, Josh, get another fight under your belt, get 2 more fights under your belt, and we'll be happy to see you back at the top soon. When you're a little bit older, a little bit more physically mature, maybe when Pantoja rides off into the sunset. But for me, it just feels like this fight has violence written all over it because Van forces you to fight, and Pantoja is more than willing to engage. So let's find out who's got the better sauce on Saturday night. What do you think, man?
I'm going to break this fight down a little bit differently. For me, I'm not involved when it comes to this fight betting-wise for the sole reason that I truly want to enjoy the fight. I think it's that close. I think it's a fight that's compelling to watch from a viewer standpoint more than anything. And when it comes to both guys, Joshua Van, up-and-coming 24-year-old prospect who likes to show off his boxing and his combinations and durability. He trusts his chin more than anything, and he's shown to really eat big shots and remain unaffected in every single one of his fights. I mean, most notably in the Charles Johnson fight, he took a hell of a beating before the knockout. And then in the Brandon Royval fight, that was also a war back and forth where a lot of people were questioning whether Josh Van could keep this fight upright. It turns out that Brandon Royval's wrestling did not really trend all that well against Josh Van, and he was not able to take advantage of the ground game there. Josh Van on the feet. He took advantage of Brandon Royval's striking defense and landed a ton of combinations as this fight went into the end of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, really cementing a dominant victory, in my opinion, where he showed levels. And you look at the Bruno Silva fight, another fight where he just shows levels and ends the fight with that right cross. So this guy is not afraid. He shows the composure and the confidence when he's in the cage, and he walks guys down and is unaffected by what they're throwing because he truly feels like his game plan is going to outweigh what anyone else brings to the table. And good on him for thinking that. But this is a guy that openly admitted in interviews that he started wrestling just under 3 years ago. This is someone who just started training jiu-jitsu just under 3 years ago. Sure, I believe he's a brown belt now in his gym, but maybe that gym is giving him a little bit of a prospect pass here with that brown belt promotion within 3 years. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it seems like it's a little bit fast-tracked. But I respect Josh Van, and I think that he can present a tough challenge here to Alexandre Pantoja, who himself, yes, we know him to be the stellar grappler and wrestler, but has shown a lot of improvement on the feet. It still is a little bit more clunky, relies a lot on his chin as well, eats a lot of shots, returns them well too. And in this fight, I think it serves him well to really chase after the wrestling here. And the difference between him and Brandon Royval is that Pantoja, he got the wrestling, man. He can pair it with the jiu-jitsu, and his jiu-jitsu is elite when it comes to control. And if he gets you down, it's going to be hard to get back up. And I'm sorry, Josh Van, as much as I love watching you fight, it's a little concerning just to, think you've been training just for 3 years in the wrestling and grappling department. It's few and far between that can overcome that sort of level gap where it would be between your wrestling and grappling level compared to Pantoja's. And Pantoja, once he gets on your back, brother, I think it's you're gonna go to sleep. You can't be tough for that. Josh Van's been knocked out before, so I do think that Pantoja can land a bomb on the feet here and hurt Josh Van and potentially get a club and sub. The whole world is on Pantoja sub, which I don't like. Very compelling fight. I see this fight going either way. I think there's a finish one way or another, whether Josh Van knocks Pantoja out or whether Pantoja knocks Van out or submits him. I don't see this fight going 5 rounds. I do like the violence angle. I'm just very excited. This is my favorite fight on the card, and I've been looking forward to this one for a long time because Josh Van is someone that I've been thoroughly impressed with at 24 years of age. We haven't seen anyone like him in a long time.
Shout out to my guy, Jewish Better, Houston, Texas, stand up, 4-ounce fight club, stand up. I do think that, he comes from a good team, well represented, but on the other side, American top team, as proven as it gets. So I think it's a great fight. Like I said, I'm bowing out and choosing violence and hoping that one of these guys can deliver for me. So cheers to that, my man. It brings us, of course,
I got one more
to the main
thing. One more thing on this fight. And this is just, this is some man of the library narratives here. Tonight, one championship, main event for the belt. Our guy, Bakhtar Ulu, won his belt, the first Mongolian champion in mixed martial arts history. Why not the first champion from Myanmar? Joshua Van.
Hey, I say to my wrestlers all the time, why not you? And let's see, why not Josh Van? He's got a tough opponent though, my man. Pantoja, as good as it gets, so it should be awesome. All right, brother. It brings us, of course, to the rematch, the one to decide it. Merab Dvalishvili, Petr Yan. I'll send it over to you first, my man, but I'll just give this one piece of color. The first time these two guys fought, I bet Merab Dvalishvili at plus 200. The guy said I would rather kill myself than lose to a Russian. I was like, oh, sign me up. Plus 200, no doubt about it. That's the kind of motivation I'm looking for in this fight game. And Merab went out there and absolutely rinsed the guy, right? But I expected more resistance, right? Like I just expected it to be a harder fight. And when somebody says when they looked like shit in a fight, hey, I was injured, it makes sense, right? If they got beat, but they looked like themselves, that's different. Petr Yan didn't look like himself in that fight. He looked like a shell of himself. He wasn't throwing the right hand. He wasn't hand fighting. He wasn't doing anything that he normally would be doing in some of those scenarios. And he still defended a lot of the takedowns, guys. I think he defended 39 takedowns out of 49 or something. I forget. I don't have the math in front of me, but basically, he D'd up an absolute shitload of takedowns from Merab, but Merab is a freak. So he's able to attempt almost 50 takedowns in that fight. And that's really hard to deal with. Eventually Jan was running out of ideas and answers for what do I do when this guy keeps attempting takedowns, because I can't win or score rounds by just defending. And that was basically the negative cycle he was put in. But I feel like we saw one time before in the bantamweight division with Petr Yan in particular, he goes from being minus 110 with Aljo to being minus 500 with Aljo in the rematch, basically. And what had changed, was that Aljo won via disqualification, and people were like, no, that was bullshit, right? But at the end of the day, watching back that fight, Aljo said I was injured in that fight, and that's why I was fighting so fast. That's why I was fighting like crazy. And that was plausible to me, right? Like it made sense. Like I was like, Aljo has never looked weak before. You could say, hey, maybe, Petr Yan's a better, he couldn't grab a hold of the guy. He would go to grab a hold of him and he couldn't. And then Petr would pick him up like a rag doll. And I was like, this is not Aljo. And then he got neck surgery and then he was fine. And he looked way better in the next fight. And Petr Yan wasn't healthy the last time that he fought Merab. And I'm not saying that Merab was perfectly healthy. Like all these guys go in banged up. But it just feels to me like what could change in a rematch? Somebody coming back and getting healthy seems like a bullish thing for a rematch, right? To give them a better chance. And he went from being a massive favorite the first time they were booked to being a big underdog. He's not the older fighter. He's the younger fighter between these two guys. He's not the smaller fighter. They're the same size. So it's like, what is the one discernible advantage from Rob? Like his cardio is very good. Jan, I don't think has ever been like, man, his cardio sucks. Like I never really thought that about Petr Yan ever. Like he always shows up prepared for 5-round fights. So I just feel like, yes, Merab is the better fighter. Yes, Merab deserves to be favored, but I just don't think that Merab should be a minus 500, minus 440 type favorite. Like that just feels to me like a big assumption in terms of how big this fight is moved. And I really respect Merab. I always have. I bet him against Umar when he was a big dog, but I just don't believe when two elite fighters are fighting each other, one should be like minus 400, minus 500 more often than not. I don't believe that. And when you look at Merab the last time, I thought Merab should be like minus 110, and he was plus 200. So I was like, fuck yeah, I got to bet this. In hindsight, I made a better bet than I thought. Like, he should probably be minus 150, minus 200. Like, maybe let's say if you want to get bullish, minus 230, 70%, 7 out of 10 times like that. Yeah. 8 out of 10 times. 9 out of 10. Like, how big do you want to go on? Like, Merab just wins every time. But Petr Yan sucks. Like, he forgot how to fight. He can't fucking win no more. Like, it just feels to me like watching back. Does it feel like Aljo would beat him 10 out of 10 times? Like, it didn't feel like that either. Even though Aljo is technically 2-0 against Petr Yan, even though Sarah Longo is technically 3-0 against Petr Yan, this poor guy can't get one over on New York. Them New York boys will teach you how to wrestle once again. Are we really sure that Petr Yan is like fully cooked at 32 years of age? Like, everybody just wants to pretend he's washed so they don't have to acknowledge that New York boys taught him how to wrestle. But I don't think he's washed, and now he's a massive underdog in a fight where he was favored not very long ago. What do you think, my man?
Yeah, I'm going to break this one down quick. My internet's been choppy out of nowhere. We're getting some upgrades in the area, and I just need to get a new router. So I'm on this one pretty quickly. This is a pretty compelling fight, and it's one where I do think Petr Yan is going to show a little bit better than he showed in the first fight, obviously due to the health reasons, but I do think there's legitimacy to just cutting weight a little bit too many times in the span of a year. I also do, just based on how Merab looked on the scales today, he looked a little bit more drained out than usual. I'm not going to really give into it too much. I do think that he's still going to be fine landing his takedowns. His cardio is going to be fine, and the guy's put in the work. I just think that Petr Yan's going to have a little bit more opportunities here in the striking to keep this fight upright and show his takedown defense. But I do ultimately think that Merab still wins this fight. He does land the takedowns that he's used to, and wears out the cardio of Petr Yan. I think eventually Yan will start to fade as this fight goes into the third, fourth, and fifth rounds, and that's where Merab's going to take over and show that his cardio is the biggest advantage to his game, not just the wrestling. But yeah, that's what I have on this fight. It's very dry here. I'm not really involved in the last two fights, specifically betting-wise, because I've been trying to enjoy these title fights that are a little bit closer than I think, and I would say this is a dog or pass situation.
Yeah, man. One thing I've always prided myself on is knowing when to get on and off a train, right? And I've made money on Merab fights, but I have to acknowledge I've given a little bit back in his recent fights, right? I had a Corey Sandhagen bet. I had a, Sugar Sean O'Malley bet, both at like plus 2XX, right? Pretty big numbers. And what I thought were going to be competitive fights, more competitive than they were. Sandhagen goes out there, wins the first round. I'm like, man, we're feeling good. Then he gets hurt in round 2, and the fight just slipped through his fingers at that point. He was unable to recover. Petr Yan's never been finished. He's a guy that's gone out there and fought a pretty difficult strength of schedule throughout his career. And so I just think he's a tough guy. He's hard to put away. And he's a really talented fighter in every phase. His wrestling's good. He took down Merab the last time they fought, even with an injured hand. He took down Aljo when they fought. He's a guy that really has a well-rounded skill set. He's a very good counter boxer. And the things that we've seen that have gotten to Merab in the past, body work, people have hurt him to the body. Sean O'Malley's an example. You think about the fact that he was able to get hit with a couple big clean counters. We saw it happen to him against Henry Cejudo. We saw it happen to him against Marlon Moraes. I will note, guys, I bet Merab Dvalishvili via KO or decision minus 135 against Marlon Moraes. That was way back, right? But I had that bet. And you know what bet I also had? Marlon Moraes, round 1 or 2, plus 550. That was my hedge, a very small quarter unit as a hedge play against that. And Marlon almost cashed it because he beat him every which way but loose in that first round. So Merab, for as fucking tough as he is and as skilled as he is and as much as he's improved in the striking, which he has, he's still a human being. He's not a machine. He's a human being, and fighting 4 times in a year, there's a reason a lot of guys don't do it. There's a reason especially that a lot of champions don't do it, which is that they can't hold up under that pressure. Now, Merab is fucking special, and he's an all-timer in the division, all true. But 34 going on 35, that is when a lot of people lose their title belt. Pantoja facing a similar age, right? Could he, buck the trend and do one more? Yeah, these guys are special fighters. They're tough, but their day will come sooner rather than later. It's a young man's sport. Merab had pre-existing broken palm bones and yet threw 402 strikes. Yeah, Merab is a savage, man. You can never take a single thing away from him. As tough as it gets, very skilled, but he does not have a huge repertoire of finishes in his UFC resume. I think that's fair to note. And you look at who has he finished? I'll just tell you the truth. That choke against Sean O'Malley was Sean O'Malley capitulating. It did not look to me like Merab hit some new and unique variation of the choke. Like it looked to me like the choke was starting to be applied a little bit, and O'Malley was like, "Get me out of here, man. I'm done. You got me. You're better. We found out." So I want to say shout out to Israel Padilla in the chat. Says, "What do you guys think about the cage size?" I'll just say for myself, that is an X factor for me as well. Like, what could be different in a rematch than the first fight? It's easy to spam takedowns when there's very small surface area because you can keep getting to the spots you want. Whereas when somebody else has a little bit more, space to be mobile and use their footwork, it could be to their advantage. Now, if you're trying to defend takedowns up against the cage, maybe that could be a little bit of a give and take, right? But as far as I'm concerned, I think that having less space is beneficial for the wrestler. It makes it way easier to get to your spot. And having more space, I think, is beneficial for people that want to keep it upright and strike. I think that Merab obviously wants to wrestle, but I think he's also willing to strike. I just think that that's where it could get more dicey for him, right? I think it's easier to cover big spreads, getting 20 takedowns against Corey Sandhagen than it is, trying 49 takedowns and only getting, 11 against Petr Yan, right? So for me, I don't know that Merab on his fourth fight of the calendar year has 50 takedown attempts in him. He's probably got 35, probably got 40, but I don't know if he can still pull that one out. That was literally, ahistorical in UFC history. Nobody's ever done that before. Nobody's ever done it since. Merab is a freak. So I guess you got to say the pick is the machine until proven otherwise. But I went from being, on Merab Island when they fought last time to now I'm like, I might have to throw a dart here and hope that Yan can flip the script, get a trilogy fight going. Because the other thing about it is, who's next up? If Yan loses this one, I would say it's probably going to be my guy Amin Zahabi. So y'all must have forgot the Canadian Alpha, Amin Zahabi, has been lurking in the shadows. But right now, Petr Yan, he's basically fighting for his championship legacy because Cerro Longo has taken everything he's worked for. So he needs this one bad. And at 32 years of age, I don't think he's washed, but I do think, he has regressed a tiny bit. So it's a question of who's going to regress harder, the 34-year-old who's fought 4 times in the year or the 32-year-old who kind of looked like he, was in his peak maybe 2 or 3 years back. So let's find out, man. Should be a great card. Great action all throughout, compelling fights, compelling narratives. My man, the floor is yours. Anything you want to say, anything you want to get off your chest, let's hear it.
First and foremost, shout out to you, Liam. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to everybody who was watching and giving us a good comment section here to go off of this show. Thank you so much, as always. Shout out to everybody. And if you guys want to go ahead and check out my first video back on YouTube, interview with Evan Elder this week. And looking forward to putting more interviews and building up that YouTube library again. So be sure to follow me there at with MMA, and then I'm looking forward to uploading more. And I'll have some picks here and there, maybe some football. We'll see.
I love it, man. I love it. And I'm seeing in the chat a couple of people saying they don't think that it will help with the spamming. I'm seeing people say it didn't help footwork guys like O'Malley and Sandhagen. The only one point I would say is that both those guys are a little bit longer and taller. And when you've got long, tall guys against somebody that just wants to wrestle, it does give them access to the hips constantly. And I think that for a guy like Yan, he's kind of got that smaller stature. And that was something that I think frustrated Merab a little bit in the wrestling the first time they fought, because it wasn't as easy to lever him over and kind of get those takedowns and lift him up and tip him over. It was a lot more extended single leg exchanges and, Yan kind of forcing him to go to the second and the third layer finish. And I do think that, if Yan is able to hand fight better in this fight, like I expect, then I do think it's going to be, a little bit harder for Merab to get some of those clean takedown entries that he wants. Jan is a very good wrestler himself, unlike those other guys. So I just think that is the one thing I would say. Sandhagen has certainly made huge improvements as a wrestler, but he's an anti-wrestler and an anti-grappler in his core. Whereas I think that Jan, we've seen he has fucking beautiful offensive wrestling. Like aesthetically, it's gorgeous. He knows what to do. He knows how to time it. He took down O'Malley himself many, many times. So I do think, though, in fairness where it's due, Merab is the better wrestler, no doubt about that. But I'm just saying, unlike those other guys, Jan prides himself on his wrestling as well. He's very quality in that. So, that's I guess everything I got to say. But thank you to everybody in the chat, guys. We had a super active chat today and a lot of really smart comments. So thank you to everybody who contributed. I always say sharpest chat in the game. Also, Wiz, great co-host, always holding it down. Appreciation, my man. Good luck with any action that you guys have on the card. As for myself, I'm still going to be looking at these markets, going to be seeing what I missed. That Duncan line movement took me by surprise, right? So going to get myself appraised of everything, make sure there's nothing I'm missing. But I already have a couple of things that I fired on, and Lord willing, we find a couple more opportunities between now and tomorrow. But in the meantime, going to get a quick nap in, going to hit that 5 a.m. bus, and go coach some wrestling tomorrow, lose my voice all over again. So God bless, good luck, enjoy those fights, guys, and come back next time because we're having all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.